and that companies nowadays, sometimes via ambassadors, via coordinators, are pressing a bit for the continuation of the EDP. That means it's nice to see and to have this kind of feedback from the involved entities in the process. And related to that, I have to mention it. We had excellent cooperation with Mr. Domain Bole, who was playing the role of external expert to us, and by his help and his dedication, we succeeded to manage all of this, to open some boxes, black silos, and so on. He was absolutely here to be somebody who will direct us if we maybe started to do something else and not something that is related to the framework itself. It was, for us, it was really one of the crucial supports along of this process. And now we come to the very important issues of financing and this discussion with different ministries again. Sometimes ministries change the people inside the working group. It is something that could be probably faced in some other countries as well. And sometimes the newcomers actually didn't know the history of the process and didn't know what is already agreed upon with the previous ones. And this documentation of the process that was excellently done was helped a lot. It was very easy to introduce this to the new people, but it could happen that somebody come as a new one, and that you need additional time to involve somebody in the process. And this communication, particularly related to the funds, to the support measures, to incentives for implementation of the strategy. Yes, I think I just mentioned a few minutes before we started to discuss at this panel that I think it was timely when government decided to bring the process one step up. I mean, to have the support of the cabinet of the Prime Minister as a working group composed from different ministries. We came in this process to some up limit when we could not proceed on the proper way further on. In that sense, this support from the government, it was from the Prime Minister, was really important for us. Yes, the issue is to provide now to select the measures, then to provide the funds to implement the measures and the activities related to those measures. And we make a kind of map for that. We discussed a lot with several ministries we involved. I mentioned already that we had excellent communication and agreement with the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, as they would like now to be more included in the future process. They would like that we together create particular working groups that will follow the activities related to the funds that will come from Ministry of Agriculture. Up to now, they did solely without any communication with other ministries. They communicated with research institutions. They opened the different kind of calls according to their needs. They selected before, but we never communicated and cooperated on that level. And the final one, I think I'm still inside the 7 minutes. The final one is what I put on the last slide, and what on a way should be open, I suppose, to us soon, is that support we benefit a lot from the process itself. We benefit a lot from this coaching by experts of Joint Research Center, plus experts that were engaged by Joint Research Center to us. it is one kind of really important support from your side. But now we came to the position that for the future implementation, we provided a certain number of tools to be done, financial ones, but we for sure will need stronger support on behalf of the Commission in some further steps on that way.
Thank you very much, Victor. You outlined a couple of challenges that link up to one very important feature of the process, to ensure inclusiveness and ownership inside the stakeholders that do the process. So at the start, it's introducing the concept into the territory or a country. So it's not a known one. So internalization and turning it into a culture and way of working, this is one of the difficult parts. That's why the political commitment can help. But in fact, and you touched upon continuity, the system should be able to nurture, self-nurture the process itself. It starts with awareness raising, which you mentioned at the beginning. It goes through involving all the administrative structures that are relevant. You talked about the Ministry of Agriculture. That is relevant to one of the areas of the smart specialization. So this type of inclusiveness that is based on real internalization of the process is the key part of accepting and implementing the concept. Then the other thing that you mentioned is financing, and I'm sure that it will come through from many of the countries that are in the outside the EU. It will be one of the topics probably tomorrow, because our competence center that Giancarlo Carati leads on technology transfer, one of the selected areas there is financing. So it's technology transfer, but also innovation ecosystem, how to build them, but also financing, how to really build up financing in order to, of course, the Commission is there and the European Union is there, but it's also the know-how of how to build the finances around the smart specialization. You mentioned also statistics, and I used the opportunity to tell everyone in the room, without sound statistics, it is very difficult to go through the first evidence collecting phase, because it is based on statistical evidence, qualitative analysis, but it really needs the sound facts at the start. So keep it in mind. This is something very important. Let's now go. Thank you for sharing the challenges. Now let's go to Milena, very freshly out of the first phase of designing the strategy. Tell about the challenges that you faced and how they talk to each other with what Victor said.
Thank you, Charlina. On behalf of the Ministry of Science, I would like to thank you, as well as the colleagues from the Serbian Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development, for the invitation, and to congratulate Serbia for designing the smart specialization strategy.
Thanks.
The process of development of S3 Montenegro started in early 2017. We take pride in the fact that our government adopted the strategy on 20 June this year, and after that we submitted it to JRC for formal evaluation. We hope that by end of the month we will hold the country dialogue with EC, actually 5 directorates of EC. From the beginning of the process, I would like to emphasize that Minister of Science put it very high on the political agenda, and we in the Ministry of Science promoted it as one of the steps in the process of economic transformation, as well as integration of Montenegro into the European Union. It was conceived as a complicated process among the different stakeholders at the beginning in the wider community, so we faced the challenge of understanding and acceptance, actually, this process. Our main challenges we faced are related in the mapping process. In the mapping process, when we prepared a quantitative analysis, we were missing reliable innovation statistical data. So we put efforts now very much to be part of the European Innovation Scoreboard. And we have the plan to be there at 2021 edition. We are missing that data for structural business statistics at NACE level 3. So we, together with Monstat, our National Statistical Office, have a plan how to have this data. And that is also mentioned in our S3 strategy as one of the weaknesses, as well as multi-annual budgetary planning. So we have the plan that in 2021, multi-annual budgetary planning will be introduced. We work on this with colleagues from the Ministry of Finance. So I can emphasize that during this process, we in Montenegro, as a small country, really had great cooperation with different ministries. Following finalization of this quantitative and qualitative analysis, combining both approaches, top-down and bottom-up, we faced with proper conducting of EDP. It was also a challenge for us to gather all stakeholders and that they express their demands, that business actually express their demands. So we held in total 62 workshops with a round of 300 participants, and half of them were coming from the private sector. So prioritization is done. Probably could be even more bottom-up. And as a result of that, 4 priorities have been identified. These are sustainable agriculture and food value chains, sustainable and health tourism, energy and sustainable environment, and information and communication technologies as horizontal platform. Now we can say that S3 is recognized in our wider community. And actually, different stakeholders now are really familiar with this strategy and the challenges we are now facing with the implementation. It is rather a short time since we adopted the strategy, but I will inform you about the steps, some steps we already have taken. So the S3 is implemented on the basis of the action plan. It is discussed this week at the government, and it is for the years 2019 and 2020. The action plan defines in more detail all relevant elements, including in particular the financial resources to be committed for the implementation of individual measures. One of the instruments for maybe one of the most important instruments for the implementation of the S3, we see the Center of Excellence. So we published the call for establishing a Center of Excellence and directed stakeholders towards smart specializations. 2 centers are now being negotiated, and they are very well responding to the priorities of our smart specialization. The first one is in the field of biomedicine, and the second Center of Excellence for biomedical research, and the second one is in the field of digitalization of food safety risk assessment and accurate certification of food products authenticity. I would also like to inform the participants about establishment of the Council for Smart Specialization and Innovation. We established the Council as a high political body that is under the Prime Minister on 1st August this year. The main task in the future period, actually at the first session the Council will hold in the next month, is to propose the national structure for the implementation of the S3. The members of this council are the ministers, the relevant ministers, Minister of Science, Minister of Economy, Health, Tourism, Sustainable Environment, Education, Culture, directors of the two prominent universities, as well as directors of relevant institutions related to the strategic topics. During the designing of the smart specialization process, we had an interministerial working group that was chaired by our national coordinator. It also involved director generals of the different ministries, also representatives of main universities, business sector representatives, and NGO. But this council is much higher political level, and we are really happy that Prime Minister is really pushing this process of implementation of the strategy. We have already initiated the opportunities for accessing the S3 thematic platform you mentioned, and we are really thankful to JRC colleagues, particularly Manuel and all team, for facilitating process for us. Thank you for that. I would also like maybe to emphasize that given that structural funds and the ESIF used by EU countries are very much in line with projects financed, which projects connected to S3, I point to the needs for IPA funds in this direction, and as we see, the IPA instrument is imported here. We already used the opportunity to programming IPA for 2020, and we, Ministry of Science, take part in the sectors of national IPA in two sectors called competitiveness and innovation, and other education, employment, and social policies. But we must think about IPA 2021, 2027, and it should be directed, dedicated to implementation of the S3. At the national level, maybe just to mention one more thing, that we are already building the capacities. Besides Center of Excellence, we have grants for innovation projects. So this call also is call for grants for innovative projects to award grants for projects that comply also with the priority areas of S3 is currently under evaluation.
Thank you very much, Milena. Again, statistics, sound statistics highlighted, budgeting of the process, and actually it's not only the financial resources available, but also project pipeline and projects based on the smart specialization. So the selection criteria behind these projects should be fully aligned with the strategy. Then multi-level governance, so you have the high political body, but also at operational level, kind of reflecting the stakeholders' representation. Then just to highlight, and probably it will be good to have the slide with the four priorities and the areas, so that they are there and everybody can see and kind of reflect on them. But two of these are common. Yeah. Of course, the sub-areas are probably a bit different, but they can be part of a vertical, for example, value chain. So I will be very interested probably next time, either in North Macedonia, but let's create a competition, or Albania, to see probably some projects that can spur up in these areas, or complementing areas, but in one value chain between Serbia and Montenegro, for example. This is an idea. You can start working concretely, and then we can suggest positive examples. So thank you very much, Milena. Really fresh from the first phase, the strategy design, now entering into the not easy way of the implementation, but very fruitful and very gratifying in the end. Then, now we go to Kerstin Koren. She is the head of unit of the Office of the Provincial Government of Lower Austria. So, what is your experience? Any challenges? Anything that you can share on what the previous speaker said?
First, I want to thank you to have the chance to be here in Belgrade for the first time in my life. It's wonderful here. Thank you. And thank you for the GRC. to invite me here. I want to say that I'm very impressed of the process you have had here in Serbia. You have conducted it. And I think the first challenge will be to keep up the pace you have, because if you see the whole things you have done until now, the workshops, the stakeholder process, the entrepreneurial discovery process, that's the thing. It's really challenging, I think, when the implementation starts. Maybe a little bit that you know where I'm coming from. I'm coming from Lower Austria. It's the region around the capital of Austria, around Vienna. So if you think 30 years back, we were agricultural land. If you can imagine green fields, mountains, a lot of woods and industry going back to the 19th century around a capital city, like a lot of other regions in Europe. And we started in the 1990s with the regional innovation strategy, where we started, it's not a smart specialization, but the first priority settings in our area, because we didn't have any university in place. We have a rural country and so on. And there we focused on specific fields where we built up in the last 30 years, I think, yeah, now it's 40. I'm getting old. Really places where we have research and development there. We have science and technology parks like here. And we have enterprises at these niches we identified in the last years, 30 years. And how do you get there? At first you have to prioritize and give money or dedicate money. But money is not, it's my opinion, it's not enough. You have to have instruments like such as these parks or clusters or any instrument who chose which is really important for your region, and you have to continue with these instruments, and you have to monitor and evaluate. It's in each process you have heard qualitatively analysis, statistical analysis, and so on, but that doesn't stop with the first process. I have to admit, you have to do that regularly, on a regular basis. And then that's what is the next challenge is, how do you monitor? When you monitor, how do you steer the programs? How do you measure the effectiveness of your instruments? And then there is something really interesting, and you will face it like every one of us has faced. There are some instruments who won't work, so you have to close them down and think of new instruments. And that's a political challenge, it's a communication challenge, and it's something you will face in your governance process, in your evaluation process. So maybe I can give you an example. We have had a cluster for building construction with wood. And we steer and monitor our programs with the balanced scorecard system, which means we have we define the goals in front of the at the beginning of our programs. We have indicators, qualitatively and quantitative indicators behind each program, and also because we want to be a part of the innovation system, also the government and my department has its own balanced scorecard system, which means we measure ourselves also with indicators qualitatively and quantitatively. And then we review it once a year. We're coming together with the program owners and discuss it. And maybe I started, after university, I started in industry, where I was in the process. Then I was working for an agency for the government, where I was a program owner who was discussing about the balanced scorecard system, about the indicators with the government. And now I'm in the government and discussing with the agencies what are the goals and the indicators. So I know the different perspective of everything, and the first years were very hard for all the partners in the system, because it's the first time you get some measurements. I have to at least 10 new projects, new cooperation projects in the field of plastics, for example. And then the first, it's human nature that at first you say, oh, help me God, what will pass when I don't reach these goals and so on. So you have to build up trust in this system. You have heard it before, there is a culture change, and that culture change needs time. Thinking back, we started with the balanced scorecard system in 2004, and it's now 15 years, and I have to admit it takes 5 to 6 years that you really have this cultural change, that you're working together, that you're focusing on the goals. And one output of this really challenging process for every participant, for every stakeholder in the system is that at the end, if you have the trust in the system, then that doesn't matter if someone quits and go wherever and a new person comes, because the system is built on trust on the one hand side. On the other hand side, you see what is your goal, where do you want to go, and if you see you can't reach the goal, then you at least can say, okay, we have to adjust the instrument, we have to close the instrument and do something new. Maybe what are the challenges now? Now we have to revise our S3 strategy because the 21 program, and there we see some interesting challenges arising. Our instruments are usually were sector specific, which means cluster policy and so on is sector specific. And we see now with digitization, with the new technologies and the platform economy, the barriers of the sectors are well, and so we have to think, how do we overcome this? How can we have our measures, our instruments working together more closely? If you think of innovation ecosystems, there you have everyone in your whole ecosystem working closely together in one of the key fields you define. So that's the thing we were now strategically discussing with all our stakeholders to come up with our new S3 strategy. And maybe for the one question you asked, internationalization, I have to say there are a lot of possibilities to get into projects with European Union countries, like the Interreg projects, the ERANET projects. There are a lot of different types. And we are in, I think, now 6 projects now. And I have to say, you can learn from each meeting you go. You can learn from each partner you be there. And I think it's a huge possibility that we get from the European Commission to have the chance to interact. Because I think, I'm in charge of digitization too, so thinking of all these new technologies, you can't know everything in your countries. So it's really important to discuss and to challenge each other and to learn from each other from the other regions.
Thank you very much, Kerstin. A number of very good messages. Keep the energy and the trust in the system so that continuity is not by default any problem. So again, the culture element which is built through years, so consistent and aligned efforts are needed, especially in the first years. Then prioritization, that's why, let me just use this opportunity to say that for the countries that are still to go, it's a painful process because it's in this dialogue between the stakeholders, between business and research community and also administration, it's a struggle how to keep what you have been doing for years and years, but probably didn't work. So it's a painful process, but without prioritization, we cannot have critical mass for investments that will bring from research and through innovation economic results for well-being in the country. So that's why we are so insistent really to go down into scaling down and focusing the priorities so that it makes sense to highlight them as priorities. Then instruments. And indeed, the continuity of the process, also of the entrepreneurial discovery process, it's not only to have, you know, a circularity. It's also because, and remember, smart specialization strategies are not set in stone. In order to capture evolving elements that could factor into the review of the smart specialization strategy, you need to continue this dialogue. So it looks that instruments are a key element of success. But I'm not going to talk about that because the whole second day is about instruments. So I'm sure that Giancarlo heard very well that sectoral approach is not anymore probably the best one. Not that we have to abandon it, but we have to combine it with the horizontality of technological transformation of society and new features like platformization of economy. So we have to be really alert of the speedy evolving environment. Risk-taking. This is one of the most difficult parts of investing in research. So there should be a prudent approach, but at the same time, it has to be inbuilt into the system that you can take a risk which might turn into a failure. So we have to accept the failure. But in order to reduce the failure, we have these lessons learned exercises, and you mentioned very nicely, Kerstin, the convening power of the European Commission and the European Union as a project. So putting everybody together, sharing, learning from the experience of each other so that we can reduce the risk to the minimum. And evaluation and monitoring indicators, it needs time to build the culture, but it bears fruit. And probably now we go to our Lithuanian colleagues, Aramojus, who is head of innovation policy unit in Lithuania, in Mosta.
We changed our name to Strata, actually. Now we are Strata.
Okay, tell us about Strata and the challenges that you see and how you see the process of smart specialization in the country.
Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to be a part of this vibrant Western Balkans community of research and innovation. I'm very glad that with the help of DGNR and GRC, I also had an opportunity to visit some other capitals, to meet people, to talk about smart specialization, share my experience. And Serbia is a special country among those because also with the help of GRC, I had an opportunity to share my experience, provide some advices in some parts of the strategy for the last, I don't know, 1.5 years probably already. So today it's a great moment because today the strategy has been presented. I feel joy, I feel a little bit of responsibility, how it will go on with the final touches, how the community will work with the strategy, how it will be accepted. And of course, I wish all the best. And yes, sharing the experience, starting from Western Balkans, I can see that there are some very good elements here of the whole picture, of the whole puzzle, even some elements that we are missing in our ecosystems of European countries. For example, from the very beginning, what was fascinating and was fascinating me was the governance in Serbia, the leadership of one ministry that took the responsibility to develop this strategy. And I think it's obvious that this is a crucial part of the processes in all other countries as well. So that was a very positive experience to see that. Also, the one moment that was mentioned by Victor today is the engagement of the stakeholders, and especially the private sector, the industry. The participation of industry in Serbia, it was almost 60%, which is tremendously high. We have huge problems bringing our businesses to the table, talking about the strategies. Yeah, maybe we failed before that. We failed to keep our promises, and maybe they would not like to spend and commit more time with us anymore. Maybe there's other reasons for that. But today here we have a very good engagement of the stakeholders, which should be a very a crucial advantage, I would say, again. And talking about the specialization as a whole, as a concept probably, really evangelized by GRC and other DGs, I would say that it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of investment. The strategy, as you already experience, is not something that can be manufactured in a closed space of a small cabinet with a limited amount of persons. No, it's a very broad, it's a very huge investment into an future investment, which strategy is itself. It comes with a huge investment to develop the strategy. So probably now there's a crucial moment to keep the promise, to keep that investment that's been made by all stakeholders, to move forward with that. And yes, coming to Lithuania, there's a saying that implementation eats strategy for breakfast. I think Michael Porter, maybe he was the one to say that. Well, that's not completely the case, but there might be some cases with implementations of the strategy like this. Because yes, as Ms. Sharlina mentioned, Lithuania was one of the first countries to develop the draft of our concept of smart vision strategy. I think that happened 2014, maybe that, even before that, before we entered the new programming period. I mean, we felt that we are ready with that. We built a tremendous concept of policy mix, a very live one, with not industrial, for policy mix for every priority together with a roadmap. You know, you put in the measures, then you turn them off, then you measure something. It was a very clever approach, and it was selected as a good practice European-wide. We made a lot of presentations for many regions of European Union countries, how we think it could be done. But then came the implementation, of course, and we saw it's too complicated to implement it like that, and we had to simplify everything. We had to say goodbye to our dreams. But not being really negative, it's working. I mean, it's all right. But the thing is not to really make it too complicated, because it just will not work. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to manage, to have not everything as a priority or one priority, to have a selection of priorities, and to manage them accordingly. Talking about, well, the crucial elements that's already been mentioned here. Yes, this smart specialization strategy for many regions and for Lithuania, and I can speak about surrounding regions, and for Poland probably, and Latvia and Estonia, some other countries, it comes with a price. The price is that you have to pay is, of course, I can only cite Michel Landabasso, who was one of the first probably people. Yes, yeah, because the elements that will be there always is co-creation. You have to develop the strategy co-creating with your community. It takes time, it takes resources, and it's a challenge. Then already been mentioned by Casa and Sharlina that it's about risk. You take a risk actually, and you acknowledge that you take a risk because you put somewhere your funding, and usually that's a public funding, as a priority, and then will it happen? Will something happen? Will it not? You're not really sure. So it comes with the risk, and with the political risk especially, which politicians are not really eager to take all the time and acknowledge it. And it comes with the price of a selection. You have to make a selection. You have to make choices, meaning that you draw a line, that something is a priority, something is not a priority, and that's it. It's very comfortable to thrive in a system that everything is a priority, you know, or today is priority A, tomorrow it's B, and after day maybe it's C, if somebody will suggest it. No, you fix the priorities for a limited period of time, and you have the acknowledgement of your communities that these are the priorities. And it's very hard to make that point, to achieve that point. That something is a priority, something is not a priority. Talking about the governance, it's very crucial that somebody takes the leadership. And again, Serbia is a good case. It's a very good example that one ministry, together with, of course, the support from the political support, from the support of the coordinating group and other bodies and institutions, they really took this initiative from the very beginning to the very end. And they managed to deliver the strategy to the country. Now it can be not a strategy of one ministry, but a strategy of a country adopted at the government level. So it's really, important to think how the governance will work during the implementation of the strategy. EDP, it's already been mentioned today, and it's not worth probably exploring it in details, but talking about the next period, yes, that now all the countries and Slovenia and Austria, we are getting ready for the development of the new strategy, of the next generation evolution of our smart city strategies. EDP is a crucial element, and actually to have a fixed EDP for this, I don't know, for half a year before you choose the priorities is no go anymore. The EDP should be somehow made a constant process. And again, coming back to the Serbian approach to smart city strategy, I think you're already thinking about it. To have EDP as a constant process, feeding in some information, getting it back something from the EDP process. I think it's a good modern approach that we are trying to achieve now in some of the European Union regions. Data, yes, it's crucial to have the data, and now you're entering a phase of implementation where the data is necessary to understand how are you performing with your priorities. It's challenging to make an attribution of certain amount of data which your statistical department will gather and to attribute it to the priorities. But when you will have to tell your stakeholders, your politicians, your co-investors, so how it's going with the strategy, then the data becomes crucial and you have to have it. And the last element is, yes, is the monitoring systems. It costs quite a lot to establish a monitoring system because you have to have data, you have to have the processes ready, you have to have the people working with that. But it pays off. When you have to measure how it's going, you can make choices actually, and you can make well-informed choices. You decrease the risk that of your decisions, of your choices previously made, to something that can be really well documented, really well biased and grounded by the data. And then it really pays off. You make less bad choices having the monitoring system than vice versa. And it's worth element of the strategy having it. And it keeps your strategy alive actually. Then you can talk with your stakeholders about it. So, well, happy to be here again and really wishing all the best for Serbia and all other countries around. Looking forward for more smart relation strategies in Europe to be developed. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, how to involve the stakeholders. And we witnessed that the business community is probably more difficult to attract. But it also relates to the fact that in many cases we don't have a real demand-driven innovation and research. And I remember the moment I joined the directorate while I was in DG Regio of Northern Europe, so Baltic, Nordic countries and Poland. And the first time we discussed the smart specialization process in Finland, I was positively impressed by the fact that 95% of the innovation that is being done in Finland is demand-driven. And it goes very much into what we witness in the US and which is quite reverse in terms of percentage in Europe. So, and that's why in the Nordic countries, because there is this type of culture of demand-driven innovation, that's why this research investment goes into economic growth, and that's why they are more than some of them, they reach 4% of GDP investment in research without, so that is the natural way of doing things. So the more the system is not demand-driven, the less the system is demand-driven, the more difficult it is to attract business. So everything kind of mixes up into consequences and results. The other thing was the workable solution. So we shouldn't make it too complicated. We have to make it simple. The workable solutions can be somewhere to share. Don't create monsters. The system is complex because we need analytical evidence behind, but not because we need complex systems behind. So again, evidence, monitoring, this reduces the risks and validates the system. So the reduction of the risk comes from various elements. Evidence-based, so all this analytical work behind that verifies that these are the strong areas, sharing of experience, and at the end, if this risk materializes, the political understanding that this is how it has to be taken forward. Co-creation, indeed, this is the basis of the process. We have our last speaker. So we have again Gorazd with us from the Smart Specialization Coordination Unit of the Government Office for Development and European Cohesion Policy in Slovenia. 7 minutes, so that we can end at 1 o'clock.
Thank you very much. What to say after all has been said now, and in 7 minutes. I could talk for much longer, but I will try not to repeat, although some of the points that have been taken out, but I believe that they are very important. But first of all, allow me to say srdačan pozdrav svima. Meni, za razliku od Kerstin, mi je uvek drago doći u Beograd i ostati barem jednu noć, tako da i nekoliko duže ako je moguće. I come from, as I said, as it was mentioned, from the Government Office for Development and European Cohesion Policy. I am a member of the core 4 people who are responsible for what we have done with the smart specialization in Slovenia. And we believe, and the results on the ground are showing that it's a good process. Why I'm mentioning that it's a good process, as everybody before me said, it's not that something you could do outside or inside the room, but you have to go outside, ask the stakeholders, make the continuous entrepreneurial discovery process. So it has to be a live document. What I would like to emphasize also is that congratulations to Victor, the whole team, and to all of you who participated on what you have done. But I will join here the Ramoyus he already mentioned. This makes you even a bigger challenge. All the process has to be all the time open, you have to deliver on time what you promise. If possible, you have to deliver on time. So don't complicate too much, don't make too high promises, be on the ground and deliver on time. Besides, another very important message would be, I see that you, and I very much feel as well, you have the engagement, you have the political support. So it's a perfect combination. You have the aspirations. Now I feel you are like we were. It reminds me on our process. I can share with you in Slovenia at that time when we adopted the smart specialization. Before we adopted, the climate was terrible, horrible. Nobody wanted to cooperate. Nobody wanted to. Everybody was hiding from the other. But you have to understand at that time also it was a crisis. And I would say the biggest achievement we have done, it was the change together with all the stakeholders and all the research institutes and all the companies. It was the change of climate, change of behavior, change of attitude, that you can fulfill what Charlina mentioned. What is the most important? Cooperation, collaboration, that you are partners, even though at the end you would compete for at the final market. You can be competitor, but the development, the research, in that phase, you can and you have to cooperate. And that's one of the messages that I would like as well to share. The other one is, I believe it was not mentioned, beside the political support, is also the stability of measures and of support. Why I'm talking this? In our region, we are very, very much used to that, okay, now it's this government, in 2 years, if you are lucky in 2 years, or if you are really, really extremely lucky in 4 years, they change. But in 2 years, let's say, comes another one, and everything what was done before is crap. We have to change. So, the stability of, and what the environment, what the ecosystem needs is the predictability and stability, at least of the support. We are living in an unpredictable world, but at least in that you need to give something. In our case, for instance, in the governance system, for the first time we have done, it was the tender for the support of our clusters for 7 years. So the next generation of the politicians who came, and they couldn't erase it. They couldn't change it. So it was at least, and the stakeholders knew, okay, if now I will do good, there will be a support even in 2020, even in and so on. So yes, you mentioned at the EU level that it's enabling condition and so on. True. I believe that the most important element now you are facing is the proper governance system. For the implementation, I would say the governance system is a must. In our case, how could I describe our experience is, let's say we established the multi-level governance system and the inclusive governance system, we like to say. Everybody can be No.
It helps me.
So I believe you are behind that.
Yeah, it's kind of, intuition and, some kind of energy does it.
Yeah. For I was mentioning the governance system. The governance system is incorporated in our case in that level that the stakeholders are organized. The so-called mega cluster strategic research and innovation partnerships are organized one strategic partnership per each priority or each domain, let's say. And what is important, we have now heard that entrepreneurial discovery process should be continuous. True. But government cannot do it all the time. Stakeholders you have to make the selection, and in our case, one of the tasks of the SRIPs is also to further prioritization, further discussion among where do you want that the government policy, development policy should go, and so on and so on. On the other hand, of course, when it comes time to change for the adoption of the new smart strategies, the government will do again, and now we are in that process that we'll do again, the entrepreneurial discovery process. But the continuous element is on the stakeholders. One more important, I have only 2 more messages. It was mentioned about the monitoring and evaluation, the importance, true. Monitoring, of course, we have to, if we don't monitor and we don't evaluate, we can do also bad choices. In our case, we decided that this exercise was in Slovenia the first example of that. Already when we started the implementation, we started the evaluation. The evaluation process was continuous from the beginning of the establishment of SRIPS. Nowadays, by the end of September, we received the first results, which will be the ground for future financing of SRIPS. We inserted so-called framework, a successful framework, now for who will do better will receive more money. The last one, future of in Slovenia, the example I like to share with you where it can bring to. As it is important, the cooperation, collaboration among the stakeholders and among the, so that means enterprises, research institutes and so on, is important as well the collaboration and cooperation among the national institutions and multi-level institutions. In our case, now we are talking about the revision of the smart specialization. In our case, also the ministries who are involved, that means 13 ministries in our case of Slovenia, so it's really horizontal issue. The 3 main ministries, so our government office, Ministry of Science and Ministry of Economy, decided that we'll go even a step further from where we are now. So that means that we will try to join, and we see the interests also from below, that we join and adapt, make it more coherent in one document, in one strategy, the science and research document, the Slovenian industrial policy, the Slovenian entrepreneurial support policy, the smart specialization, and with possible the digitalization. So we'll not finish only with making the smart specialization, but we'll even expand, because we see that that can bring benefits on the more coherent approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I asked Giancarlo whether we can have a bit more time for lunch afterwards, so to slip a bit the afternoon agenda so that you don't suffer from the delay. Very interesting comments again from Gorazd. It's challenging to be the last one and say something new. Still, alignment of the whole strategic context. So S3 is not somewhere there, and then you have industrial, then you have science, then you have economic development strategies. It's all together. So there should be really coherent approach, and smart specialization should be anywhere where relevant in the overall strategic framework. Full alignment, various levels, regional, national. So it's not an easy work, but when you understand the concept behind, it's clear that this is the only way forward. Then what you said about the monitoring, it also brings trust into the system. When the question is whether to review some of the priorities, then what comes to play and can substantiate such claim? It's the evidence that comes from the initial process and from the monitoring and evaluation. So the self-cleaning and the self-assessment of the process is one and the same thing. Very importantly, you said something about the stability and predictability. And I saw some smiles. I'm not going to quote names, because in the region that I come from and you come from, it is so familiar that every next government starts to start again. And I have to tell you, when I was in DG Regio covering various countries, one of the most frequent meetings that I had was with a minister that will come to my office and ask whether we can kind of stretch a bit this priority to go into this direction because probably he or she had in mind a project that needs to be financed. No way. So if send your ministers, new ministers to Brussels, and we will tell them that there is a sound basis of this process, and because of the predictability that is needed, we have to focus on the areas we decided properly in a very inclusive process, and in order to keep the promise to the business and show that it is valuable because there is trust in the system, we have to keep it. Of course, when I said it's not set in stone, whenever evidence comes, we can fix here and there, but it's a good balance between non-rigidity, kind of flexibility, and stable and predictable process. So it's not easy. All that I'm saying, it's not easy, but makes sense, I hope. And the last thing, and I will conclude with that before I give the floor for some urgent questions, there is much more in the system than just, phase 1, phase 2, mapping, evidence, statistic. There is trust and internal energy. So this is exactly the internalization and the living system behind. So thank you very much to all the contributors. It was really quite substantive and content-born. Let's give an applause to everyone that spoke.
So I'm afraid that after this very interesting food for the mind, we need also some food for the body. So
one or two questions.
Or maybe one or two questions. Okay.
Okay, hello to everybody. My name is Dr. Nina Radulovic. I am a member of Scientific Council from Montenegro, and I will be bothering you this afternoon by taking participation in a panel. But just now I would like to make two quick and very direct and short questions. Maybe direct, but not short. I will try to be short, to Victor and to Miss Kirsten. Victor, we have listened to your nice presentation even before this panel. And I was really listening carefully by trying to see how the Serbia is progressing, because Montenegro has adopted strategy, and formally it's a few steps, or maybe better to say a few months advanced in respect to Serbia. But Serbia, from the point of view of prerequisites and instruments for smart specialization, might be more advanced. For example, you already have such a nice premise like this Science and Technology Park, and we are going to build it yet. And you already have a fund for innovations, as well as a science fund. My concrete question was, since we all know that basically smart specialization is putting innovation policy instruments on the right place, what new value added smart specialization brings to Serbian innovation ecosystem in terms of infrastructure, governance, or maybe instruments? And the second question is for Ms. Kirsten. Because Montenegro also, during preparation of smart specialization, toughly work on developing monitoring system with appropriate indicators. And we were always discussing with the respective colleagues from GRC about a set of indicators which are basically input indicators, outcome indicators, result and context indicators. But at this panel, it happened to be that you mentioned like a new classification of indicators, noticing quantitative indicators and qualitative indicators. So could you be more precise in the effort to explain a little bit more about these qualitative indicators? Because indicators should always be more or less expressed in numbers and relied on good statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. This is a question for a thesis, for a PhD thesis. So this is a challenge now to reply in 1 minute. Thank you, Nina. Thank you very much. You're enlarging your time from your afternoon session.
Yes, thank you, Nina, for this question. Yeah, you're right. We already have this developed enabling conditions for the implementation of the strategy itself, but in our measures we planned much more. And I didn't have maybe enough time to explain all of them, as we are still discussing at this very moment some of them with some of the stakeholders, but soon you will see a much maybe clear picture on the new instruments, new infrastructure, new, what was the third one you mentioned? Sorry? Governance. Related to the governance, it is the new one that will be implemented. I mean, the structure of the governance of the process will be the new one, and yes, we will have much more related to some not only incentivized measures and activities, but a lot of other ones related to the organizational things. We would like to, for example, one of these is related to the changing of the mindset. From one side, business community, and from another side, research one, to make each of them closer one to the other. It is also one of the measures. And we also discussed with JRC about some of the activities that will be related to reach that. There are a lot of novelty, actually, in addition to what already exists in the system. We could continue if you want. Yes. 1 minute already passed, okay, to continue to talk on that later.
Yeah, okay. And there was a question here in the last one.
No, so Kirsten, to answer.
Okay. I guess
a short,
doesn't matter.
A short answer. You're right. We usually have input indicators and outcome indicators. We measure them qualitatively or quantitatively. Qualitatively, if you are in a collaboration with your stakeholders, I think the qualitative indicators, measured indicators, are very, very good to learn from each other, to learn how the system functions as a government, and to provide better information, more understanding from the stakeholder side to the government. And the second thing of qualitative indicators, one is at least success stories. And you will know that you always have a political level in each thing you are doing, and with success stories you can tell the people in plain words what the instrument is for. If you have concrete examples and go out and say, we have had one big, one big project with 3 enterprises in our region, and now there are 150 more employees in these 3 enterprises. That's a best practice example, because they cooperate internationally with R&D R&D facilities and so on. And that are the 2 perspectives. I think that qualitative measured indicators are really important for the whole process.
There was this second question. Can we promise, because there was a third one, that it will be taken in the afternoon session? Yeah, okay.
And if you have any question, you can email me, and I can send you some of our indicators.
For everybody.
Yes. So, the second one.
Thank you very much. Mine is a more general question. I'm Dr. Saygın Oğuz. I am coming from Turkey, city of Izmir. I am the head of planning department in Izmir Development Agency. We have a regional innovation strategy in Izmir that we are implementing for 10 years, and now we are planning to prepare our smart specialization strategy. And this event, we can learn from this event very much from Serbian experience. Thank you very much for hosting us. I want to ask, in the regional level, especially in the implementation phase of the smart specialization strategy, is it possible to focus both local funds and also national funds in the same prioritized areas? Because As a development agency, we provide some local funds, the municipality, the universities, etc. But at the same time, central government and central government institutions in the local level are working. So is it possible to unify, to bring together these funds in the S3 areas? Thank you.
Absolutely. When it comes to financing, it is really not linked to the smart specialization process as strategic orientation, prioritization. So we have to think about the financing, and it's always a chapter, but where the financing will come from, whether it will be grants or it will be financial instruments, and how they will be put together, there is no difference whether it comes from the EU in terms of support instruments that are available to your country, or whether it's local, or whether it's business fundraising, doesn't matter. But on this, actually, it will be the whole second day and part of this discussion, but no problem at all. And actually, this is what we propose, that it's a real blending of all the financial instruments and the financing around the strategic priorities. So I'm sorry about your question. Let's book it. Yes, and if you want that it is raised in public, then Manuel promises, because I'm his boss and he cannot refuse, that he will take it in the afternoon. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
So we reconvene at 2 o'clock here. So you have 45 minutes, a bit more, 47 minutes to eat, and then we come back.